Some collectors have said to me, watch collecting begins and ends with a time-only watch on a strap.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
kind of venture through complications along the way, but then you end up realizing that it was in front of you all along.
We have a lot of really cool, some even a little weird watches on the table today, but first let's introduce our guests. We're sitting down with Tony Traina of the Unpolished Newsletter. He's a lawyer by training that had a very successful watch newsletter on the side, got picked up by Hodinkee where he was there for some time, and has now branched out to his own with the Unpolished Newsletter. I'm a paid subscriber and it's information you can't really get anywhere else, very well refined, and it doesn't waste your time, which is one of the best compliments I can give any piece of media. Tony, thanks for coming down. Thanks for bringing your collection. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Thomas, thanks for having me on the show. It was a little nerve-wracking. I don't travel with, 8 watches I think we've got here on a regular basis, but happy to bring them out to Brooklyn for you.
Yeah, and some serious vintage stuff as well. I want to start with not a wristwatch, but this one over here. My simple question is, what the heck is that?
Whenever I do things like this, I like to bring a non-wristwatch or two just to open people up to the idea that you don't have to have just wristwatches, especially because wristwatches come with a certain price tag attached, right? So I brought one pocket watch for you today, Thomas. This is a Seiko Golf. So as you can see on the dial, obviously it's got the kind of dimple pattern on it of a golf ball, as you might imagine.
Seen Seiko Golf wristwatches before, but not in pocket watch form.
Yeah, they make the wristwatches are cool as well. They've kind of got a Patek case vibe. I was given this pocket watch by a mutual friend of ours, Eric Wind.
Shout out, Eric.
Last time I was in Palm Beach, I played some golf with him. He gave me this watch, and I grew up playing golf as well. So it's kind of a nice way to, it's a nice excuse to have this watch. It ties together a couple of interests of mine.
Do you use it when you're playing?
I don't. I can't say I've ever taken this outside of the house. Perhaps I should just tie it to my bag. I think that's what it's for.
That's a pretty handsome chain on there too, I gotta say.
It is. It's kind of nice. It seems period or era appropriate. But I like to set these on you can get a little stand and you put it on your desk, and it's kind of a second watch that you can kind of just glance at when you're cutting videos or writing about vintage watches or whatever it might be. So I like pocket watches, table clocks for that reason. And affordable too, less than $1,000. So I like them for that reason.
If you ever get tired of watches, there's plenty of little clocks out there. I personally don't golf. I've been once in my life. I was working at a country club in high school and I got kicked off of the course that I worked at. So I want to move next to a piece that it's a brand that a lot of people see at the mall, but this is not a mall watch. What can you tell me about this Movado M95?
So this is a Movado M95 Chronograph, panda dial, black subdials, matte white dial. Movado was one of the first brands I really fell in love with. You can find them for oftentimes under $1,000. If it's a time-only watch, they made a lot of beautiful Calatrava style watches. Used a lot of the same suppliers as brands like Patek Philippe and Vacheron. So
we got Bordeaux cases and everything.
Exactly.
Just really sharp, like detailed architecture that a lot of the big brands use for like much, much less.
Yeah, so this has a Bourgel case. The M95 to me is my favorite vintage Movado. I've had a few over the years, but I love this panda dial variation. And yeah, it's got a waterproof Bourgel case. It's only about 35 millimeters, but because of that, it feels kind of substantial on the wrist. It's got these beautiful facets on it. It's just a nice sharp case that oftentimes you see some of the design cues from watches that are much more expensive in a watch like this. So I like it for that reason. And it was one of the first brands I really got into. So I've always had a Movado or two in the collection since then.
Yeah, what else have you had? Like, what else have you explored?
To me, Movado is very kind of elegant and classical in a way. This watch, like I said, it's very simple at the end of the day. A 3-register chronograph. You see this from a lot of brands in the 50s and 60s. So the M95 is one to me. It's got its own in-house movement too, which is kind of unique for the era. Yeah. But the other branch I explore a lot is I just call them their Calatrava style watches. Honestly, they also use Bourgel cases. So Movado is something I collect by case maker as much as the brand itself because I just love the architecture of these cases, as you were talking about. Any Bourgel case in a time-only watch it wears beautifully to me. It has a lot of these Calatrava-like vibes in the more affordable range of things. So you'll see Tempomatic is one of the names you see a lot. It's an early automatic movement from Movado, but very kind of time-only, simple, elegant three-hand watch that you wouldn't necessarily expect from a brand like Movado.
Yeah, so really good suppliers where they get their parts from, in-house movements. good designs. I mean, you can find these with like the little squiggle hands on the
Yeah.
subdials and things like that, which are great little details. And for people that are like, I don't know, looking for a dress watch or something, they're like maybe want to test out vintage. That's like another, maybe more unexpected kind of if you know place where you won't break the bank either.
I love vintage Hoyer chronographs, for example. It's just a level deeper, I would say, than the Omega Hoyer Rolex that you know, and it's a good
Then
way
getting
to
another Speedmaster.
exactly, exactly. It's a nice on-ramp into those things, and you might graduate into some of those bigger, more well-known brands, but if not, Movado has a lot to offer too.
Yeah, really for collectors to show off to other collectors, I feel like.
That's right. That's right.
And
Otherwise,
that's why we're here, yeah.
I mean, even at collectors meetings or if I go to enthusiast meetups, people will see it from a distance, and then when they look closer, they'll be surprised that it's a Movado still. I mean, it's a very niche thing.
Yeah, and the extra points for the Panda dial too.
That's
I would
right.
say.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So from the 50s, we go to the 70s. And what is it about this era of Cartier that struck you?
Yeah, so in the 1970s, Cartier, the brand, was kind of reunited. They had three branches, New York, Paris, and London. So before that, you see all of these wild, crazy, unique designs that were made specifically by or for those specific branches.
Yeah, I think Cartier London specifically got pretty freaky with it.
That's right. These are the ones that I love in particular. I mean, I'm not alone in that regard, but in the 70s, they built out a Swiss manufacturer, a Swiss supplier, and kind of standardized a lot of their production and then brought back a lot of their classic case shapes that you know from what I guess you could call the golden era of Cartier in the 10s and 20s when they started making the Tank, the Santos, and the Tortue. I've always enjoyed the case shape just because it's a little bit, it wears a little bit bigger on the wrist, or it has a slightly bigger profile than the Tank Louis, the Tank Normal, some of these other watches. And it's just different enough without being such an out there watch that it's making a statement on itself, that it kind of fits the vibe I'm going for. I think all of my watches are kind of quite minimal and clean and elegant, I guess. Not necessarily when I wear them, but the watches themselves. And to me, the Tortue is just a level deeper than the standard Tanks that you see quite often. And when I saw this one with a nice sort of clean enamel dial,
Yeah, Paris style as well.
Paris style, I just really like the look of them. And it's not like the 70s watches are the most well-made things in the world, but they're fun to find and collect.
Okay, interesting. What do you mean not necessarily the most well-made?
I just mean compared to the previous version or the previous iterations of Cartier in London and in Paris, a lot of these things were quite luxurious, made to order or special orders for clients. And then in the 1970s, you see them ramp up production, and it's kind of this mass luxury in a way that is a little bit different from what you see in previous generations. Don't get me wrong, I still love the watches. I love wearing this, but it's not quite the same thing as the Cartier of previous years.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot to love about the watch, obviously. I mean, its case profile is great. It's super thin, looks great on the wrist. Do you wear this like only dressed up, or do you find other occasions to
Only
slip this
dressed
one?
up. Let me tell you, I was on holiday last year, vacation last year, and I got caught in a rainstorm in Europe with my wife, and I was wearing this watch, and I was absolutely terrified that it was gonna get, some sort of water inside of the
Yeah,
case.
it's put in your pocket, Tom.
That's exactly what I did. I put it in my pocket. I was hiding it under my jacket because I was terrified about the fact that it might get some water inside of it. So since then, it's very much a dressed up occasion where I know I'm going to be going from somewhere inside where it's safe and air conditioned to somewhere else.
See, I do like yellow gold dress watches, like hoodie, jeans, no matter what.
Right.
I like a little high-low, you know?
You're a much more sort of urbane and suave gentleman than me, I think.
I think it's all attitude. I think it's all attitude, Tony.
Attitude, sure.
So we're going from a brand that we hear a lot about, Cartier, to a brand that not a lot of people think about, which is Junghans.
That's right. That's right.
How did this watch come about, and how does it fit into your collection today?
So the first watch, I've told this story before, but the first mechanical watch I ever bought was a Nomos Tangente. It's identifiable because it's got all of the calling cards of Bauhaus design from the 20s and 30s, very minimal. I cycled through some modern Max Bills from Junghans. Then I discovered that they actually made Max Bill watches in the 60s. There's kind of an original era from when the designer originally designed the watch for Junghans. And I found one eventually, And I kind of decided that I had to have it. Again, it's not the most expensive thing in the world, but it's quite rare and difficult to find. I've not seen more than a handful of them pop up over the years. And it's this beautiful, just minimal design, clean lines.
Super worn patina too.
Super worn patina. I love the font. Like if you looked at this, it's very sort of futuristic and space age, like from Disney World's Tomorrowland or something like that. It doesn't feel like it's from the 60s.
Like super dated.
Yeah, but so I love it for that. And it's just like a kind of a calling card to some of the first watches I bought, and what initially attracted me to watches was this very minimal Bauhaus inspired design, as they call it.
I love when collectors do that. They kind of like take their like initial inklings of when they were first getting into watches, and then now that, you know, certainly you've learned a lot more over the years, like kind of circling back on that and revisiting something with a newer look at it, let's say.
Yeah, I have some collectors have said to me, you know, watch collecting begins and ends with a time-only watch on a strap.
Yeah.
And you kind of venture through complications along the way, but then you end up realizing that it was in front of you all along, type of thing. And I kind of feel that way with this watch. It's about as simple and clean as it gets, and that's why I like it.
And speaking of straps or non-straps, what do you have it fitted on here?
So this is a Forstner bonk lip bracelet. I just thought it was very sort of era appropriate and quirky, but I thought it fit the watch well. And I haven't been wearing it on a bracelet much, but it completes the look in an interesting way that I had not expected.
And they're so light.
They, more than almost any modern brand, have managed to capture this light, airy feel of vintage bracelets that I love.
Just for the sake of contrast, let's go from something light and minimal to something beefy, huh?
It is light though, because it's a carbon case.
That's true. Okay, yeah. So now that I pick it up, because, you know, looking at it, this is like a hunk of something, huh?
Yeah. I mean, I brought this because I love a lot of what micro brands are doing. And Unimatic is one of my favorite. I visited them in Milan before, and the guys that founded the brand just have a great eye for design. And this is a watch, as you can see, it says Hodinkee on the dial. It was a friends and family edition from the time I worked there. Obviously something I can never get rid of, because it reminds me of sort of my start in watches full time as a profession. So it's a calling card back to that. And I love wearing the watch. This is kind of my summer watch, the rubber strap, so light you barely feel it on the wrist. And it's just a great tool watch.
Yeah, how does this wear? Because this is like just on paper a pretty substantial watch.
They're big watches, but the reason I like it, and this is the first Unimatic I've ever owned for any amount of time really, is because it actually is light on the wrist.
Yeah, because the material.
Yeah, it's not steel, so it's carbon, it kind of disappears. And then it's got this full lume dial, and I love full lume dials, so it's kind of a cool thing.
Oh yeah, so not just the hands or the hour markers, but like
Yeah.
the whole 360 is.
Yeah, so it's very cool, and it's not something you see every day.
Very cool. And yeah, this is not a watch you would need to put inside your pocket if it starts raining on
That's
vacation.
right. That's right.
Now, Tony, before we get to some really cool stuff that we save for the end, I just want to open it up a little bit. You know, you've been in this industry for a while professionally. You're obviously a passionate collector. Any piece of advice you would give out there for people who are like maybe just getting started into this or want to get deeper into collecting?
In terms of collecting or buying watches, I think I generally subscribe to the buy once, cry once principle.
What does that mean?
So I think it's basically buying the best example that you can afford of whatever reference you want or whatever watch it is you want. And if you feel like you're stretching your budget, or if you're compromising on quality because of the monetary restrictions that we all have in terms of collecting, then it's probably not the time for you to buy whatever watch it is you're looking at. Buy the best you can afford at the time, and if it's not quite there for you yet, then just wait and keep saving and get the one you really want. I think I have regretted more buying too soon and making compromises on quality and condition, or buying a quote unquote lesser example of what I really wanted, then I've never really regretted kind of waiting and then pushing the budget to get the best example I can find of whatever watch.
Yeah, because then at that point you're sure you've like given yourself the due diligence of waiting, and then yeah, you get a really great piece out of it.
Yeah, so buy once, cry once.
Okay. One piece that might have brought you some tears, let's say,
That's right.
is this guy right here. What can you tell me?
Yeah, so this is my 1016 Explorer. It's from the mid 80s. It's a later example, so it's got a matte dial here, but I love the way that it feels like a modern watch in the sense that it has a solid bracelet, a matte dial. I feel like I can wear it anywhere if I get caught in that rainstorm. I wouldn't be too concerned if I had this watch on. because of all of those features.
Oyster case, baby.
Yeah, exactly. But it's still got this nice warm lume that seems to be aging in a nice kind of fashion.
Yeah.
So I like that about it. It's a vintage watch, to be clear. A 1016 is a vintage watch, no question about it. But it feels like it's wearable every day, at least for most of the situations I find myself in. And it's one of those things. The first Rolex I ever bought was a 5-digit Explorer, the 14270. It's the ultimate purest distillation of Rolex sports, in my opinion. There's the Submariner and the dive bezel, but even this kind of distills it even further into just only the most essential information that you need. Obviously, if Rolex marketing were to tell it to climb a mountain or to climb Mount Everest, but for me, it's, you know, catching the train on time or whatever else, right?
There are people out there who say this is maybe the most boring vintage Rolex out there.
I would say it's simple, not boring, is kind of what I would say. It's an enduring design, and I keep coming back to it over the years. It was one of the first watches from the vintage Rolex catalog that I think even if you're not a Rolex person or a vintage Rolex person, you can kind of understand the inherent beauty. Let's just call it what it is, the beauty of the watch.
Yeah.
It's a Rolex, but it's simpler than that. I think understanding that distinction makes it not boring. It's really hard to do something this simple. I mean, we see it all the time with brands that kind of are just trying to do too much.
It feels harder to do the little things right sometimes, I feel like, than just adding another complication, another font or whatever it is, you know, another Dismo.
A lot of brands do it where they feel as though they need to add one more thing, but this feels like an exercise in editing yourself, which is the hardest thing to do if you're a brand, if you're creating, whatever it is.
If you're running a newsletter.
That's exactly.
But yeah, great example, warm lume. Sticker still on the case back as well?
Yeah, I don't put too much stock in that. It's kind of cool, and
yeah, it's a fun little,
little
thing.
It gives some evidence that the case is kind of sharp and honest and original, but beyond that, I don't make too much of that.
Is this your daily, or do you have a daily?
I wear this most days, honestly. I love modern Tudor. I wear a Black Bay 58 a lot. That's probably the daily for me, or it has been for at least the last couple of years.
Yeah, is that your Rowing Blazers one?
I do have a Rowing Blazers Black Bay 58, and since I got that a couple of years ago, that's kind of, in a way, the modern take on this, or on the Tudor Submariner, obviously, and I wear that quite a bit too.
I never get tired of seeing these, and like, what a really good example too, like you said. Buy once, cry once. Now, from Rolex, we're going to somewhere completely different. I set this up in terms of contrast. And I actually bought this Swatch right here because of you, Tony. So I know you have the 90s chronograph, the skate bike, or at least you did at the time.
Yeah. What's this one called? The Black Friday?
The Black Friday, yeah. So this is the SCB 100 or something like that. The 90s like predecessor to the Moonwatch.
Yeah. Well, I love vintage swatches, I think we're about to talk about, but the vintage chronographs in particular. I mean, this one has tritium lume on it. How cool is it to have a swatch with tritium lume on it?
Yeah, right?
So 37 millimeters, it wears great. The standard time-only swatches are more like 34. They're a little small, so it's just the perfect modern size to me.
But yeah, it's funny to hear people say that there actually are like collector level swatches out there, I would say, and I feel like this is becoming one.
Yeah, I don't know if I would go that far for almost any swatches, except for maybe, I think there's that platinum one. There's an anniversary edition or something.
I know, there were a few $1,000s. I mean, the Keith Haring's.
Oh, the Keith Haring's, yeah. This is a fun one, a recent pickup for me. It's a swatch. It's basically a wandering hour, so it's kind of a fun complication, if you want to call it that, or a fun take on the wandering hour, which you often see in much more expensive watches.
AP Star Wheel, Urwerk, for example.
Yeah, and to think that when those brands were doing that in the 90s, Swatch was like, you know what, here's our take on it, is fun to me. I think it's from the mid-1990s. There's also a white dial version. I picked this up recently because they're not expensive. They're less than $50. Yeah. It's a way to have fun with watches still.
Yeah, it's like a little piece of candy that actually tells you the time as well.
It's a piece of candy, that's right.
We saved this one for last. On the pigskin strap, this is a Reverso, but a very important Reverso, but not one that people talk about a lot. I'm just going to open it up. What do you got to say about this?
Yeah, I love the Jaeger-LeCoultre Reverso. To me, it's one of the underappreciated icons, I guess, of the last 100 years in watches. It doesn't get a lot of airtime compared to other designs from brands, but this is what we call the Corvo Reverso. So the story of the Reverso is that it was born during the Art Deco era in the 30s and made through the 1940s, but after that, round watches became pretty common and popular because of soldiers during World War II. And the Reverso kind of fell out of favor and they stopped making it for a bunch of years. And that was until the early 1970s when their Italian distributor was, as legend goes, as story goes, I've talked to descendants of the family, they were visiting Le Sentier, the Jaeger manufacturer in the mountains of Switzerland, and they uncovered a handful of old Reverso cases in a drawer, just fumbling around in the drawers of Le Sentier as one does. And they said, we should bring this back, guys. What are we doing here?
Yeah.
And
Jaeger, decades it had been dead at that point.
That's right. So Jaeger kind of shrugged their shoulders and said, how are we going to do that? So they basically said, give us those cases. We'll take them back to Milan and figure out how we can make a Reverso in modern times. About a year later, they came marching back to Le Sentier proudly with these watches in hand saying, look, we figured it out. We figured out how we can place a modern movement in these old 1940s cases. And Jaeger said, okay, that's great. I guess we'll make 200 Reversos for you to distribute in Italy.
200 two-dial colors, so 100 of the gray and 100 of the white, right? If I remember correctly?
That's right. 100 gray like I have here, and then 100 white that are similar to that. There are legends of very VIP clients in Italy lining up to buy these, and to sell out 200 Jaeger LeCoultres in the 1970s in 3 months is really quite impressive. And from
during
there,
the quartz crisis as well, yeah.
During the throes of the quartz crisis. So after that, they endeavored to bring the Reverso back in full. They manufactured a new case that was a lot nicer than these cases, I'll admit. And through the 80s and 90s, the Reverso became a really popular watch, especially in Italy, which, as we know, are kind of trendsetters in vintage watches especially.
Definitely, yeah.
And so we kind of have the Corvo family to thank for this story, and it all kind of ties back to these original 100 or 200 Reversos from the early 70s.
Yeah, and it's so funny because it is, we don't use the word icon lightly, but I think it's completely appropriate here. But it's funny that an icon came back from the dead as essentially like a personal project, like a passion project by one guy, basically.
And it's cool to think of a time when one person could influence an entire brand or manufacturer on that level is just a really cool thing. And to think about the relationship between manufacturers and their retailers on the ground and just trying to deliver what clients actually wanted is an interesting thing to think about. And it's a very different time from today.
Yeah, especially because today it feels very much like a closed system. Like you have some where it's like, all right, Tudor listened to their fan base, and now we have XYZ watch, whatever. But it's not something that really happens very often. I gotta say the dial on here is like really, really cool and something different than your typical Arabic numeral or like baton hour marker.
Well, I like it because it reminds me of, say, a Cartier in a way with the Roman numeral dials. It feels a little different than the standard Reverso, and that's one of the reasons I like it. Beyond the story is I just think the aesthetic is pretty cool too.
And Tony, I think a running theme here is that you have recognizable brands, but you've gone one step deeper into the muck to find some really cool models. So my question for you, Tony, and we'll end on this, is what's next?
Into the muck is such a good way of putting it, I think. As you said, I think we've got 8 different brands represented here. The one I don't have, nor have I ever owned personally, is a Patek Philippe, and I think I would like to get a nice simple Calatrava for myself at some point. An additional dress watch, maybe to take the place of something I've got on here. I've been doing a lot of work with a mutual friend of ours, John Reardon, and learning and exploring more all levels of Patek Philippe, vintage and modern. I love so many of the mid-century Calatravas when they really hit their stride, and all types of designs. I think the 2508 with its nice...
I was going to push you for a reference or two.
Yeah, it's got these beautiful geometric markers. It's one of my favorite dial designs of all time. Beautiful thin case, about 35 millimeters, so it wears nice and modern, but the dial design is just something you don't see on many other watches. I've had my eye on that reference for quite a while.
Well, I certainly hope you get one, and I'll keep my eyes peeled as well. This is Tony Traina from the Unpolished Newsletter. I'm Thomas Hendricks of 2024. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.